May Jesus be praised and onward with Mary. A good and holy day to you all, my dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, and in the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning feature, Saints and Coffee. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of November, and the Church celebrates the liturgical feast of a rather unique, little-known pope from the early centuries, a life which, in fact, inspired today's title, The Window of the Saints and Coffee column. I'm talking about St. Martin I, Pope and Martyr. St. Martin I, Pope and Martyr. He inspires this Holy Father today. Now you will hear a couple of things. The title of this morning's column, which is The Vicar of Christ and the Pope who carries the cross. We'll talk about it in a moment. Not to be confused, obviously, with some kind of strange coincidence with yesterday's St. Martin, Bishop of Tours. Yesterday's was a bishop in Tours, the first non-martyr saint. Incidentally, he's the patron saint of the city of Buenos Aires, and there's a festival, as one of the faithful from the small remaining Argentinian community told me, a traditional festival. Let's warmly greet the faithful Argentine remnant. And today is Saint Martin, the first pope who suffered terrible pains to safeguard the Christian faith from heresies, as I will now recount to you, because it's a story that deserves to be told, and will make you reflect on the fact that the popes, as vicars of Christ on earth, are attacked by Satan, are targeted by the devil. If they aren't targeted and have the world's acclaim, one should ask oneself a few questions. In fact, there has never been a pope, truly never, not even the not-so-saintly ones, who as true holders of the munus, haven't had to face trials and tribulations in their lives. Even the Renaissance popes had their share. We'll discuss it soon. The Pope, Christ's Vicar, bears the cross. Today's Tuesday, so tonight it's War Tuesday. Don't miss the appointment at 9 o'clock in the evening on Radio Domina Nostra's YouTube channel. We're about to finish reading the book, The False Church and Its Destiny, updated edition. We've taken it around, and we'll continue to take it around. You can ask our Radio Domina Secretariat to send it to you if you like. Tonight's title is absolutely significant. In a moment, tonight's post will also air. Share, 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 always like all the broadcasts, all of them. As soon as you connect, like it straight away, and then above all, subscribe if you haven't already. The title this evening is quite significant. In a few moments you'll see it, so share the post. In a few moments I'll tell you the title. Meanwhile, it's the great test between Rome and Fatima. And by the way, does 𝐸 and the 𝐷𝐸 mean anything to you? 𝐸 and Dr. 𝐸𝐶? He talked about it at length, made it a key argument, and now he's sensationally denying it. Then he can beat around the bush all he likes, but I'll read you a sentence he wrote in an article published. You can look it up on Roma.it. The title is Ratzinger's Stubbornness Explains the Break with Bergoglio's Church. The article is from the 14th of July, 2023, when goodness knows where Father Faré and Father Cornate were, and the 𝐸𝐶 we knew had his ideas straight. Look, we'll talk about it tonight. Naturally, mine isn't at all polemical, as those gossips keep saying. Say what you like, it's because he can make reflections, and it's not polemical, it's serious journalistic criticism. If, however, Don Minutella intervenes on the issues and contradicts 𝐸𝐶, it's polemical and disrespectful. Don't you get it? Right then, listen to how Dr. 𝐸𝐶 concludes his article on the 14th of July, 2023. Someone should point this out to him, because he's in complete contradiction. It's the very conclusion of the article. I'll read it to you, but we'll come back to it tonight. Right then, 𝐸𝐶 says, he writes, because saying is one thing, one can sometimes make a mistake when speaking. But writing is writing, especially for a journalist. And this isn't an attack on 𝐥'𝐿. It's the topic we'll be discussing tonight, but it's food for thought. He says 𝐥'𝐿 writes exactly as in 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐸's prediction, which spoke of a church of Satan that is within the church of Christ. But the time comes, 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐸 was a Donatist who was later taken up by 𝐜𝐻𝐻𝐻 and even earlier by Augustine. And he comments on the apocalypse. A time comes when the church of Christ withdraws in a way, let's say, and lets the church of Satan come out. 𝐥'𝐿 wrote last year, exactly as predicted by 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐸, Pope Benedict retired, renouncing the exercise of practical power and auto-exiling himself to the Vatican. Slowly, behind him came some faithful priests. He's talking, I presume, quite possibly in unsuspecting times about Don Minutella and the Sodality, or am I wrong, led by heroic priests, who have brought along tens, mind you, please mind you, tens of thousands of faithful followers. It pains me to see 𝐥'𝐿, to hear of tens of thousands of faithful followers. A new exodus, a new departure from the synagogue. That's what 𝐥'𝐿 wrote last year. Now, of course, one can change one's mind. God's mercy, one can change one's mind, but at least let Dr. 𝐥'𝐿 say he's changed his mind. Don't let him make people believe he's consistent with his previous thinking. And this isn't a personal attack. 𝐥'𝐿's conclusion, in fact, is written in bold. You'll find it below. In fact, it's the one in bold. Let's read it together. If we could enlarge the writing, the wording, I don't think so, but it would be useful. Indeed, the true church, writes 𝐥'𝐿, 14th of July 2023, is legally only that one. Benedict was dead, among other things, in communion with Benedict XVI, who never renounced the munus patrinum, the divinely ordained investiture. Now he concludes, as you can clearly see, here we have a perfect fit between theology, history, current events, Latin, and canon law. In short, seeing that now 𝐥'𝐿 is riding the horse of the new interpretation, according to which Bergoglio wouldn't be the Pope, but that's still the Church of Christ, serves to disprove what he was still writing just last year, except that knowing him, he'll find a way to legitimize that he didn't mean that. But contra factum non valet argumentum. I'll reread 𝐥'𝐿's sentence. Exactly as predicted by 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐸, Pope Benedict retired, renouncing the exercise of practical power and self-exiling himself to the Vatican. Little by little, behind him came faithful priests, led by heroic priests who brought tens of thousands of faithful with them. A new exodus from the synagogue. The conclusion is more prominent. See the conclusion. In fact, the true church is legally only that in communion with Benedict XVI, who never renounced the munus patrinum, the divine royal investiture. Now, it would be helpful at this point to understand how 𝐥'𝐿 intends to repropose this theme of 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐸's vision of the disessio, and the fact that the Church of Satan emerges from the Church of Christ, in a nutshell. If the Church of Satan emerges, what should still be the Church of Jesus Christ? If that one in Rome, as Father Faré says, what would be Satan's church compared to Christ's church? Only poor Pope Francis? Dunno. They can't answer these questions. They throw it into chaos, and now there's this phalanx. A gossipy woman jumping on him. Don Minutella showed disrespect. I've read unbelievable things he'll have to answer for to God, because remember, we are still ministers of God. I would have written the explanation for Brother Celestine myself. When he first went to clarify the Sodality's position, I would have written it for him. This is unworthy. What a disgrace. Then they get resentful and insist that's the true church, but keep it for God's sake. Anyway, we'll be going into all of this tonight. At 9 o'clock this evening on the YouTube channel, Don't miss it. There it is, the title. I think it's already there. If I don't see it, I don't see it. But this is the cover of tonight's catechesis. The False Church and Its Destiny. The title, The Great Test Between Rome and Fatima, in brackets, 𝐑𝐚𝐼𝐴 and the Descent, at 9 o'clock in the evening on the Radio Domina Nostra YouTube channel. This evening, then, we thank the ever-excellent Don Ramon, who last night gave a brilliant, as always, reflection. I wouldn't call it a catechesis. It actually seemed, in certain passages, a real theology lesson, that of Don Ramon. Find it on Radio Domina Nostra's YouTube. Due to a technical issue, we had a significant number of views, and unfortunately, they've been recounted. Okay, it happens. Patience, you'll find it available. And then tonight, as I told you, there's that episode of mine at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, War Tuesday, from my book, The False Church and Its Destiny. Yesterday, we had a surprising moment. The surprising moment was the 6:30 rosary I'd announced. We're repeating it tonight, this evening again at 6:30. I'm waiting for you, because this rosary prayed together is the most powerful moment of the whole day for the little remnant. When we of the little remainder pray the rosary together, we become strong, invincible, I'd say, and graces rain down on all the little remnant. And the real grace, in my heart I had felt that something would be given to me during the day, but I had heard this inner voice, what do you want? I have to take care of myself. You know, I have this problem here, for which for many I would be possessed, so I felt I'd receive a gift from heaven. You gave me that gift from heaven, because yesterday as today, the exhibition, the direction, it's a shame it's not marked with a red circle anyway, because elderly people find it hard to understand. So you see, alas, I have to say it in words. You see, to my right, you see it. There's a number. Let's read it together. The exponential number 1158. We're praying the rosary. I believe it's simply amazing, showing there's a people of rosary prayers, a Catholic people, a people of the small remnant, a people who don't give up, as we also saw in the celebrations, even up to last Sunday, the day before yesterday in Tarsino, with hundreds, sometimes thousands in the national gatherings of the faithful who come to take part in these moments of grace. I'm asking the director to show, again, here are the images, here's this post, this cover, this still image that my colleagues have highlighted. Look, that's Don Minutella, who yesterday afternoon at 6:30, the time they told me is very convenient, but since Mass is always at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can't please everyone. Some say they want it at 10, others at 11, some at midday, others in the afternoon. My dear children, the Mass is at 8. If you're unable to make it, please be patient. You can connect at another time, but do make an effort to be there live. It's the most convenient time. There you go, it's circled in red now, you see. This still image from yesterday afternoon shows the peak participation that lasted a long time, almost the whole rosary, with 1158 rosary prayers at the peak. I remain praying with them and their guide, Dom Minutella. The Holy Rosary is doing something Catholic in the face of all the gossip going around. It seems very beautiful, and I want to express my gratitude. I'd also like to ask you, when I'm traveling and able, if I was hungry and thirsty to pray the rosary with you, because praying the rosary is vital for me. If I pray it with you, it becomes a therapy, a healing therapy for me and for you regarding the post I wrote. Yesterday, we reactivated Facebook due to the ongoing battle. You'll find posts, thoughts, and images there. Still images, photographs, so connect often to the Radio Domina Facebook profile and comment. I posted about the rosary, which I talked about yesterday morning in the Saints and Coffee section, and yesterday afternoon at 6:30. You've responded. By the way, I did a count in the post, and so far there are 853 members registered in the Holy Rosary Confraternity Register. I multiplied 853 by 3 because each of the confraternity's rosary prayers is a rosary. It's called praying 3 rosaries a day. And as you read in my post yesterday, I did the calculation of how many came out of it. That is, practically every day from the small Catholic remnant, every day goodbye to the Eternal Father are ensured by the small remnant. If you do the calculation of 853 times 3, you'll get the number that I put inserted in yesterday afternoon's posts in which I did this calculation. I was surprised. It means that every day before God, the angels present in total, 2,559 rosaries. Father Pio is warned he prayed them alone. But do you have any idea what that means, my beloved children? I'm referring to those of you who are members of the confraternity, the rosary pioneers, the sentinels, all those who pray 3 or more rosaries a day, because among them there are those who pray even more, and not just women, men too. So 2,500 and more is just a roughly approximate number, even an underestimate. Some write to me of folks who pray 7, 8, even 10 rosaries. That's how we keep going. The rosary is the fuel that keeps the engine of the car running. And yesterday afternoon we experienced this moment of grace of the rosary live, which we will be offering you today at 6:30 in the evening. I'm told it's a convenient time for workers too. And in fact, yesterday 3 men called, 3 male voices, to liven up the mysteries. So this afternoon, like yesterday afternoon, the post, I remind you, the post was made separately, I think on Radio Domina. We'll show it at 6:30. There'll be the Holy Rosary live, led by me, and I hope you'll be just as numerous in the still image we're showing you again now, which recorded yesterday's live rosary at 6:30. 1,158 of you were there. Whether it will be repeated today, I don't know, but it happened yesterday, and they say because Father Ferre says that they've... Having said that, someone's offended because you call him the Lombard. I've been called the Palermitan for years, but I've never had a problem. Now I, Lombard, apologize if you were offended. Everyone gets offended here. It was meant ironically. However, Father Ferre, so evidently, nobody's offended, but Father Ferre allows himself to say things that aren't true when he claims there's a mass exodus and a coded message. Who's behind Father Ferre? Who's animating this initiative here, for which they say, even fibs, that the small change is in crisis, that there's no small change. When yesterday we prayed the rosary, the little old ladies generally connect to the rosary. Do you know that these figures are produced by TV 2000 and Telepadre Pio for the Rosary? Actually, we surpass them, because the Rosary is broadcast live from San Giovanni Rotondo, from Padre Pio's tomb, and it doesn't get the viewing figures we do. So what's the plan? Where's the crisis? Where's the mass exodus? 4 or 5. People from here and there have left, because Dr. 𝐥'𝐿𝐵, the secular journalist who now organizes the meetings with the Eucharistic celebration in which he doesn't participate, never organized them for us. He's become the one who will save the church. No, it's Father Ferre who saves the church, who says to go to Mass, and you can see where the snag is, saying go to Mass just around the corner. And so, for those who were with us but weren't convinced, it's become the elixir of life. Because who disturbs you most when you go to Mass just around the corner? Yes, Pope Francis is fading. He's not the Pope anymore. No one cares now. The key is that it's still the Church. After Pope Francis, a successor takes over. That's the Church. So these went off to Mass before they were with us, and now Father Ferre has popped up saying, go to Mass, the sacraments are valid. That Church is the Church of Jesus Christ. And so then it all became much easier, you see. Everything's much easier. Anyway, I'd like to tell Father Ferre that he should be honest enough to correct the statement that the small remainder is a mass exodus, because the numbers blatantly contradict it. There are so many curious people following Father Ferre, and they're gradually realizing his position. We'll see how it goes. Because what comes from God, as we are seeing with a little remnant in these years in which it is being massacred from all sides, because God's things are always hindered, but they never die, Indeed, the more they are persecuted, hindered, the more they produce fruits of grace. Right then, so, regarding the rosary, at 6:30. See you again. I wanted to say something on the sidelines of the prayer meetings. You know, we're still on the road. We'll be until the 8th of December, perhaps with a slight extension. I hope so, as I'll announce now. But meanwhile, I wanted to tell you that next Saturday, the 16th of November, we're in Naples. I invite the small remaining Campanian contingent to get active. Generally, few people come to Naples. I don't know why. Naples is a large city. Evidently, they're all with the Neo-Cardinal Battaglia, all with Pope Francis. Don't act like greedy Neapolitans. You've got the small change. So we'll meet at the Ramon by Wyndham Hotel, Naples, at 40 Ferrari Street, at 16:30, with Don Enrico, Brother Cell, and me. And then on Sunday, the following day, the 17th of November, we'll be in Bari at 3:30 in the afternoon, at the Majesty Hotel, 97B Gentile Street. I also urge Puglia's people to plan ahead, to be present at these moments of faith. This is a time when, and it seems to me that you are doing it all over Italy, the small remainder gathers around the Marian Priestly Association. And so the meetings we had at the beginning of November, 1, 2, 3, in Trento, Verona especially, and then also Bergamo, and in recent days in Pescara, Chieti, and then even before in Ancona, and especially last Sunday in Cassino. They show that God's people truly exist, responding as written in the posts. It's not just made up of elderly people, but there are young people, men, women, families, even children. And this is truly very, very reassuring. Right then, I wanted to tell you that the most important date is the 8th of December in Milan. There's a post announcing it every day on the movie, inviting you to come to Milan. As I say, in the film there are seats on the coaches that are being organized, especially from Tuscany upwards, to come to Milan. I announced at the meeting in Cassino. I say this in passing, and I hope you're all listening carefully, because there are always problems to solve. I announced in Milan that there would be a coach, and there will be a coach. If necessary, even 2 from Rome. There will be a coach leaving Rome on the 8th of December, around 5:30 in the morning. The coach will leave from Rome Tiburtina with a stop at Orte, at a service area that will be agreed upon for those who are of Umbria, the Marches, and the northern part of Rome, who might find it easier to meet in Orte. Around 5:30, the coach leaves Rome. These coaches are entirely free, except that when I said that, I got criticism and complaints. Not criticism, complaints, from several sources. And why Romans? And listen carefully to this. Why does the Father give the Romans a coach, but not the Neapolitans, the Molise people, the Apulians, the Trentinos, and so on? Let's clarify, Don Minutella always knows his game. If I tell you that Italy is made up of Rome and Milan, I'm basically right, aren't I? What are the 2 symbolic cities of Italy? From an official point of view, Rome and Milan, right? Rome and Milan. Then, of course, since Italy is extraordinary, you find all the cities from north to south. But why does Don Minutella hold the rallies basically in Milan and favor the Romans? Is it because she wants Romans and Milanese? Or is it because Rome and Milan constitute 2 crucial platforms, also from an infrastructural point of view, that allow, for example, by train to easily reach Milan from Rome and vice versa? So what am I trying to say with this? I'm not at all favoring the Romans. I'm offering a chance to those who can't afford the train. And it's not like I can do this from Rome and Campobasso, from Rome and Bari, from Rome and Caserta, from Rome and so on and so forth. I can only do it from Rome. So it's a symbolic action designed to help everyone who wants to go to Rome Tiburtina station, and from there take the coach provided by the Piccolonazareth Association. It's not a bank, it's an association that survives of the offerings. I'd like to thank the 𝐜𝐮𝐲 faithful for their generous Sunday donation. Finally, what It comes in through the window and goes out the door. It's truly providential to say so, because we invested financially to pay for the two coaches. But in the end, the offerings from the faithful more or less covered the cost. So when I say from Rome, it's because Rome is Rome, my dear children. If someone from Molise wants to come, they can plan, get to Rome, and take the bus. What can I do? I can't possibly do a national service. Let's open a... My dear children, tell me if I'm wrong, peace be upon us, but I can't possibly organize an Italian coach service. So I'll start a transport company. I chose Rome because Rome seems to be Rome. Or am I mistaken? Got it? And I'd also like to say, so, from Rome, no more arguments, please. It's only from Rome. Domina Nostra can allow anyone who wants to, Romans, and not only, it's not that I'm observing Romans, I'm observing Rome, which is quite a different thing. Because if there's someone from Naples or Molise or Umbria, because, for example, someone from Umbria asked, and we're stopping at Orte, who wants to join the coach, it's not that I tell them, you're from Rome, you're not from Rome, so you can't get on. You have to understand that's not the criterion. I'm thinking what to say each time. All this to say, right then, let's finally get to today's topic, a very important one. I hope I have enough time to cover it, though not as I'd planned, because this really deserves a whole lecture on its own. They're reminding me right now not to forget the 2 international meetings, but I'll mention them very quickly. Sunday, the 24th at 3 p.m. in Charleville-Mézières, France. With the small remaining French-speaking group, people will be coming from Belgium too. I hope to see many of you there. I'd like to thank again, and I'll do so every day, our friends Raoul, Adalgisa, and Sylvia, and not just them, it seems, who are working incredibly hard to try and make the faithful understand the little bit of French left, reached by the clan that claims allegiance to Father Cianci Fare, that it's not true that Don Minutella spreads hate and insults, because, until proven otherwise, it was the other side that poked their fingers in his eyes first. If they thought we were ignoring it, they were wrong. So commendably, they're trying to make those going there understand that, once again, it's devilish propaganda against Dominatella. Really diabolical, and God will intervene, I'm sure of it. Next appointment's Wednesday, 4th December at 5:30, in Zurich, Switzerland. There he is, with the trilingual experience of Switzerland, French, Italian, German. Zurich, as I've been told, is quite central. It'll be, or I really believe, I think, a very beautiful moment, because there'll be the Rosary and Mass, followed by the round table with Professor Brunoni, with a reflection on the Church after Benedict XVI, which is practically the topic that's currently dominating the conversation. Let's go to Catechism this morning, my dear children. First of all, today is St. Martin's Day. St. Martin, first Pope. Who was this Pope? He became Pope. He was from Todi. He was the 74th Pope, Pontiff of the Catholic Church. He lived in the 7th century and died in 600. Therefore, he was elected in 649, and after a few years, as we shall now see, he died. The story goes, I'll keep it short, that this incredible Pope, my dear children, openly opposed the heresy that was circulating at the time, opposed the heresy. It can only mean one thing, and I'm experiencing it firsthand. It means opposing the devil directly. Because heresy isn't persecution. I'll explain further. The persecution of Christians is providential. Because when you're persecuted, we're seeing this with the book of Revelation of St. John the Apostle, and I always invite you to listen to them, the Thursday evening catechesis, from my book Symphony of the Lamb. When the church is persecuted, Christ is pleased, Christ wants it, Christ allows it. Because persecution, as I see it in my life, strengthens your faith and opens you to the thought of heaven. Another thing is heresy. Heresy is subtle, elegant. It doesn't show its hand until it has to. Heresy can damage hearts, it can extinguish faith. This heresy was spreading, monothelitism. I won't go into it now, no time. It means denying Christ had two, human and divine will, to say he had only one. But if he had only one, it would seriously call into question the problem of the incarnation. Anyway, the Pope, with an encyclical, condemned this heresy. So the Emperor Constantine was pressured to make the Pope pay for it. Look, by now I carry this around as if it were written here. Anyone who opposes heretics has to pay for it. Because heretics, since heresy is an act of Satan, have the support of the world, have the support of the underworld powers that von Baldassar calls anti-Christian. Therefore, the Emperor of Constantinople, who was by no means a saint, practically sent a delegation to Rome to kill Pope St. Martin, who had the courage which, let's be honest, his predecessors during the Arian heresy lacked completely. If there had been someone like him, this Umbrian rock, perhaps the Arian heresy wouldn't have spread at the beginning. There was Saint Athanasius, but he wasn't Pope Athanasius. So he opposes it, and the Emperor Constantine, with the support of the Patriarch of Constantinople, that's church history, they decide to put him to death. So, an expedition was sent to Rome, and the emperor's orders were that the Pope be killed by a highly trained assassin, just as 𝐸𝐵𝐵 was believed to have been when he fired shots at Pope John Paul II in St. Peter's Square, who was to kill him with a couple of dagger blows. So this was supposed to happen while the Pope was giving communion, that is, at the moment when the assassin simulated receiving the Holy Host, he would have risen to strike him in the heart and kill the Pope, who had allowed himself to condemn with an encyclical the heresy which the Emperor willingly approved. While he's giving communion, the assassin, kneeling to receive the host in the Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore at the moment, as the Liber Pontificalis says, it's an incredible story about today's saint. The Liber Pontificalis reports that at the moment he's about to strike, the squire, the assassin, the killer, is, as it were, barked at by an extraordinary light that surrounds the Pope. God always intervenes. God always intervenes. We'll see this in other papal episodes. Yes, I can tell you how popes were always persecuted, while Bergoglio is praised worldwide. Another sign he's not the Pope. So, as the assassin takes his dagger and goes to strike the Pope, he no longer sees him, only a blinding light. The Liber Pontificalis tells this story, which is noteworthy. I believe it because I was a child. I remember that John Paul II was supposed to die, and yet he remained alive, just like Pope St. Martin. But it's not always good to stay alive, as I'll now tell you, because God saves him from that form of martyrdom. But listen now to what this poor holy man, Vicar of Christ, 79th successor of Peter, was forced to endure. Because staying alive, and then there's the assassin, he can't hit his target. The Patriarch of Constantinople finds out and realizes he's protected by God's hand, so he makes peace with him. You see, sometimes trials are necessary. He makes peace with him, but the emperor won't hear of it. To cut a long story short, he orders a proper army to go to Rome, this time to get rid of the Pope. Know what happens? It happens that the faithful in Rome get to know about it in time. They found out somehow. There are always spies for or against. And so they form a kind of human cordon around the apostolic palace of St. John Lateran, waiting for the imperial troops to arrive and arrest and kill Pope St. Martin. Think of the stories we're telling. It's all true. Pope St. Martin hears about this and fears it could result in a massacre, because the Romans won't stand for it. They'll defend the Pope with drawn swords. The same goes for the imperial troops. They won't stand for it either. They'll defend the Pope and attack him with drawn swords. Swords drawn on one side, swords drawn on the other. You can imagine the bloodshed that was about to happen. The Pope knows this, and rising from the papal throne, he orders his soldiers, his guards, to offer no resistance to the imperial troops. Then, apparently, he speaks to the Roman people and makes them weep, because he tells them that the Vicar of Christ must bear the cross as Christ bore it. It was an announcement that would come true in the perhaps unique, exceptional case of Pope St. Martin I. Prepare yourselves to hear what seems unbelievable, that it would come true to the letter, as we shall now see, because the Romans managed to be seduced by obedience. Vicar of Christ, and so they remove the guard. The imperial troops couldn't believe it. They arrest the Pope. On the night of the 19th of June, 653, he's loaded onto a ship waiting for him on the Tiber, accompanied by only 6 servants, and sets sail for Constantinople. It's the 19th of June, and he remained on that ship until the 17th of September. A harrowing journey. That's why I say perhaps it was better for him to have died when the hitman wanted to strike him. But God had other plans, and one must always accept God's will, even this one of passing through the cross, because on the ship, Pope St. Martin doesn't die, but suffers, as you can imagine, all sorts of things because he's the Vicar of Christ. The devil rages against the Pope. They massacre him. They beat him. Savagely, they leave him without food. He can't wash. He's got 2 illnesses, though, that seem likely to kill him, but he doesn't die, gout and dysentery. On the 17th of September, he arrives in Constantinople. Word spread, it had never happened before, that the Pope had arrived in Constantinople, the second Rome. And so the emperor, here it is now, in the letter, the prophetic announcement of St. Martin, the first pope, who had said that the Vicar of Christ must carry the cross, because the emperor orders, with the support of us, of the Patriarch of Constantinople, not the one who had converted, but his successor, that they should give him the proper welcome. Do you know what 𝐷𝐸𝐴𝐶 means? That poor Pope St. Martin gets off the ship in a dreadful state, barely able to stand with those chains, and has to cross the historic center of Constantinople all the way to the imperial palace, the Patriarchate, and the imperial seat. And the emperor orders them to attack him. He must carry it like the cross. They're all over him. Incredible, the story of this poor Vicar of Christ. So they throw stones at him, spit on him, hurl abuse at him. Just like Jesus on the Via Dolorosa, they jostle him. He falls several times. They throw dirt at him and mock him. The children whistle and jeer at him, and so on. The Patriarch knows from the emperor that this is already the second time he's faced death, or rather the third, because during his exile on the ship to San Martino, he was meant to die, just as he was meant to die in the attack on Santa Maria Maggiore, when the assassin was blinded by a light that enveloped the Pope's august person. This is already the third time he's supposed to die in Constantinople. Once in Rome at Santa Maria Maggiore, a second time on the ship taking him to Constantinople, and a third time in Constantinople itself. The Pope can't die, God forbids it. St. Martin was truly chosen to say that the Pope is the Vicar of Christ, and therefore the Pope carries the cross. In fact, the Emperor of Constantinople ordered him to be killed, ordered him to be killed again. But the Patriarch, out of fear of God, of God's judgment, the Patriarch of Constantinople opposed it, and Patriarch Paul II interceded. This is a notable act of reconciliation between Eastern and Latin churches, as Patriarch Paul II championed unity between them. Paul II, who was by the way ill and at death's door, interceded for Pope Martin with the Emperor, who changed the death sentence to exile. So the ordeal of this holy man didn't end there. I remind you that his mortal remains are in Rome, as I shall now tell you. They are in Rome. So Pope Martin was condemned to exile, not death, and after suffering devastating imprisonment and the humiliations of the Constantinopolitan people, in March 655 he was sent into exile to Chersonesus, in what is now Crimea, where he was forced into hard labor. Here he survives from March to September, so April, May, June, August, and September, half a year of further hardship. He dies on the 16th of September of the same year, having converted quite a few Christians. What did the Pope die of? Now comes the most common thing. So, it seems the Pope died of a heart attack and a broken heart. Know why? Meanwhile, Rome's office stood empty. The Pope was in exile. The Pope had done everything for St. Martin, both in imprisonment in Constantinople, then forced exile in Chersonesus in Crimea, to send registered letters to Rome, letters to the pontiff in Rome, but the Emperor Constantine II insisted that a new pope be elected while St. Martin I was still alive, in exile in Chersonesus, and Pope Eugene I was elected. Pope Eugene I, recognized by the Church as the 75th Pope of the Catholic Church, from the exile of St. Martin I, until the very death of this successor, Eugene I, who was also a good pope. The problem is, though, the real pope was there, and he was, you see, this is something current. The real pope was there. The real pope was in Crimea. The real pope was in Crimea, but in Rome, the emperor ordered the election of the new pope, Eugene I, who was then recognized by the Church, even though there was the fiasco of a pope still alive. What am I announcing here? It's not that the new line that's imposing itself, that is, that Bergoglio isn't the pope, but that still the Catholic Church will arrive and land. Does it perhaps have this solution in sight? It's not that in the end the seemingly vast distance between 𝐥'𝐿 and Fra Alexis will end up meeting, that is, we shouldn't expect the hour to come because there's no divine call, because there's no supernatural interest in saving souls as we have in our association. They'll end up saying that while Pope Benedict is dead, Pope Francis isn't the Pope. The one who arrives is Benedict's successor, or perhaps both of theirs anyway. The Church has recognized him, and that's that, got it? Had it, forgotten it, let's forget it, move on, don't think about it anymore, all right? Because it already happened, though. What happened between Pope Martin I and Eugene I, who became his successor while Pope Martin was still alive? This happened within the context of the one true Church of Christ, whereas what we're upholding, and they're coming down on us worse than the Constantinopolitans did on Pope Martin Worms. Dominutella is no different from him, I think. I don't know if you agree, but in these years, it seems that Dominutella has gone through the streets of Constantinople with chains on his hands and feet, and everyone on top of him, dust, ashes, whistles, shouts, spitting, condemnations, and so on. It's not very different. It's an increasingly difficult path because Bergoglio's isn't the Catholic Church. Bergoglio isn't a false pope leading the Catholic Church. Bergoglio's a false pope leading a false church. That's it. And if it's not the false church, we need to understand what we've done with the theses of Tychonius on the De Cessio, of Padre Pio, of Catherine Emmerich, of prophecy, of theology, and above all of the Catechism, which states that the Church is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic, while we have a church, that of the false Pope Bergoglio, which, according to Father Farre, is the Catholic Church, which goes against apostolic tradition. But can the Catholic Church go against apostolic tradition? Dunno. Let's finish this. When Pope Martin, poor holy man, learned that he'd been replaced by another pope, he essentially gave up and died. He was buried in the Basilica of Santa Maria de Balacernas, there in Crimea, and on the tomb of this pope, because God gets his revenge, you see, countless miracles occurred, so many that the Romans said, wait a minute, at least bring his body back home. His remains were transferred to Rome. Today it's buried in San Martino ai Monti Church. So the story of Pope Martin makes us understand that when popes are true, they are popes who suffer. My time's up now. I'd keep you another hour. It's a winning story, but I must wrap up for the calls. But I have a couple more things to say. The Vicar of Christ, Pope bears the cross. Here the Vicar of Christ, the Pope carrying the cross. When St. Martin manages to convince the Romans to remove the human presence because if no blood is shed, it convinces you. Making this speech, the Pope must carry the cross, the Pope of all time. Look what he said at the Angelus of the 29th of May, 1994. John Paul II had recently fallen and broken his femur. The Pope was to go to the International Meeting of Families and couldn't. And so at a certain point in the Angelus, the Vicar of Christ, almost wanting to embody the charisma of St. Martin first, the Pope of whom we commemorate today. Let's remember, and I've told you the incredible story, on that Angelus of 29th of May 1994, John Paul II was able to say, I have meditated, he says, I have reconsidered all this during my hospital stay. And I found myself again alongside the great figure of Cardinal 𝐕CARIO, Primate of Poland. At the beginning of my papacy, it's the Pope speaking, he told me, if the Lord has called you, you must lead the Church into the third millennium. He himself introduced the Church in Poland in the second Christian millennium. That's what the Pope John Paul II said. That's what Cardinal 𝐕CARIO told me. And I understood, look at these words now from the Pope, who is no different from St. Martin, when he told the Romans, let me go into exile because I must carry the cross. And I understood that I must introduce the Church of Christ into this third millennium with prayer and various initiatives. But I saw that these words alone weren't enough. These holy words should be recovered. The Pope said, I'm doing everything I can because by 94 I must introduce the Church. They were preparing for the 3 years of preparation for the Jubilee, and then introduce the Church into the third millennium as the head of the college had told him, that it was enough to be called Pope. Prayer and actions, he says, fall short. It had to be introduced with the suffering, with the attack of 13 years ago, he's talking about the one in St. Peter's Square, and with this new sacrifice in 94, the Pope is ill. And he adds, why now? Why this year? Why this year of the family? The Pope asks everyone, speaking to everyone, almost invoking St. Martin first. Exactly, says the Pope. Because since the family is under attack, here you really can't say these words without feeling a deep sense of emotion, asking ourselves whether we accept to carry the cross. Because the Pope carries it to teach us, Christ carries it, and his Vicar carries it, so we must carry it too. Incidentally, I remind you of the third secret of Fatima, where the bishop dressed in white ascends a steep mountain, which is Calvary. The Pope must be attacked. These are Wojtyla's words. The Pope must suffer so that every family in the world may see that there is I'd say, superior gospel, the gospel of suffering, with which the future must be prepared, the third millennium of families, of every family, of all families. If you look at the list of popes, the truly authentic, valid successors of Jesus Christ, most of them have always suffered. In the first 3 or 4 centuries, all the martyrs died. Being Pope means martyrdom. Even in modern times, it's no different. For example, let me give a couple more examples before I finish. Pope Pius VI, during the Napoleonic era, when Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in Milan, Pope Pius VI decided not to sign. He was told he had to sign the Constitution. But the Pope knew that in France there were refractory priests who were risking their lives, even though most priests signed the Constitution to avoid trouble, like those who say Mass with Pope Francis. So the Pope instead decides to do something they'd begged him not to, and Pope Pius VI even then had said that the Pope is Christ's vicar and must bear the cross. He condemns Napoleon's constitution and the revolution. Oh dear, Napoleon flies into a rage, invades papal territories. So Pius VI, who's well over 80, a venerable age back then, not so much today, but in the 1700s, 80 was practically 90 plus by today's standards, is forced to witness General Berthier's entry into Rome, where he proclaims the Roman Republic and the Pope is deposed. So he's forced to make long journeys at that age, and at over 80 years old, severely affected by illness, because even popes, the Lord has always allowed that they weren't all that well. Indeed, perhaps because even elderly people, and not only the elderly, but we've seen pontiffs even in our time, tried and troubled. It's a lesson for us all. He's forced into exile with a painful and cruel march on foot, sometimes crossing the Alps. He reaches Briançon and Valence, and here in exile he breathes his last breath, a few days before he died. In his last letter, written on the 13th of August, 1799, entitled Quoties Animo, the Pope wrote these words: "The trials that struck us so hard would have overwhelmed us if the grace of Jesus Christ had not helped us." It doesn't go very well for his namesake's successor, Pius VII, who also had to go into exile during the Napoleonic era, experiencing many trials and humiliations because Napoleon took pleasure in exiling him and giving him a stable as his papal residence. The Pope suffered, in short. Shall we then talk about the popes of our time, as I wrote in my book before this latest conspiracy by Father Faré and the Englishman? For us, the inexplicable, enigmatic Dr. 𝐥'𝐸, we want to talk about my book, Church, Where Are You Going?, where I recount the ordeal of the popes of our time, from Paul VI to John Paul I, from John Paul II to Benedict XVI. And what happens to Bergoglio? Do you think he's being persecuted? Do you think he's done some pretty bad things? He always got away with it. The world's power brokers, they defend him because they feel he's not the Pope. They know it, feel it, because if he had the seal of the munus, anyone who holds the munus is hated by the world because he is the presence of Christ in the world, the Vicar. He acts in his stead, but he is the presence of Christ, the Vicar. Today I managed to find a photo of Bergoglio, which I'm now showing you from the control room, to show you how Francis does it. Look at this photo here. It's incredible. Look, there's Bergoglio. Not in chronological order, I'm mentioning them as they appear. With Father Ivan Maria Rupnik, the serial rapist of nuns who orchestrated sexual encounters invoking the devil. And it's not just that he's been removed from the Society of Jesus. He's somewhere in the world getting away with it because he's one of our own. Next to them, you'll find Bergoglio embracing and kissing Cardinal Mac Carey, who, were it not for Monsignor Vigano's courage, would have gotten away with it. And below you'll find Bergoglio with Father James Martin, who needs no introduction. This is Bergoglio, this is the false pope, this is not the Vicar of Christ. The proof of the pudding is that he wanted to illegitimately remove the title, which is not historical, it's dogmatic, of Vicar of Christ, from the Pope's annual. He didn't want to be Vicar of Christ simply because he isn't. That's why he doesn't suffer. That's why he doesn't carry the cross. That's why he's acclaimed, honored, idolized, and loved by the whole world. Christ, it's falling apart at 90, and in a wheelchair as bones can't cope. Badly, yes. That's what most strikes the heart, which is oriented towards this satanic hatred towards the true Church of Christ. Here you go, dears. I'll conclude with this. Tonight, join us for catechesis, Rome versus Fatima, Ticconio and Discesio, 9 p.m. on Radio Domina Nostra's YouTube. Share widely. However, I expect you at 6:30 for the third rosary together. I'm not sure if... Yesterday's numbers aren't that important, but yesterday we had a truly amazing response, as the director will now show you. This is tonight's post at 6:30. For the rosaries in yesterday's image, over 1,000 praying together. My third point is this. When Martin I was deposed by intervention of the Emperor of Constantinople and Eugene I was elected, this was recognized as the valid church because it is the true Church of Christ that does this. So I wouldn't want it so that when Father Faré, Dr. 𝐥'𝐸 are speaking now, I haven't quite understood Father Cornet's position, but I think it's the same, that that's the true Church of Christ, you see. It'll all end in a mess, in the sense that I predict they'll wait for Bergoglio to resign or die, and whoever's elected afterwards, you'll see, in my opinion, won't. I'd be happy to be wrong, very happy to be wrong, quite unlike what happened with Brother Alexis, whom even Dr. 𝐸 in my presence disputed. That is, Brother Alexis ended up recognizing Bergoglio as Pope. And here I suspect that gradually, if Bergoglio isn't recognized as Pope, it will come down to recognizing the church he led, that of Pachamama, Amoris Laetitia, and trust in implication, while the Catholic Church survives as a small remnant which, as Paul VI said, to John Guiton in 77, as Benedict XVI said, irrelevant, catacomb-like. And this 𝐷𝐸 which Benedict XVI mentioned in one of his general audiences, will discuss that this evening, which 𝐸'𝐸 had the merit of reviving, only to deny it today, predicts that there will be a Church of Satan coexisting within the Church of Christ at some point. Christ's Church retreats as Satan's emerges. But which Christ Church retreats? If Bergoglio leads Christ's Church, what's Satan's church and what's Christ's? They can't coexist. What of indefectibility? Do the gates of hell not leak? What becomes of them? Isn't there a Catholic Church that worshipped Pachamama in Vatican Gardens, or was it just Bergoglio? This is key to grasp. Was it just Bergoglio who went there? Or was there a church, a mystical body of Christ, worshipping the mother of the Antichrist? But Father Faré and Dr. 𝐸'𝐸, do they realize what they've started? So, is this just Bergoglio? Just the Bergoglio Fernandez team wanting a blessing for gay couples who are now married? Or is it the mystical body, the official magisterium? Dunno. So what should we expect? So if that's the Church of Christ, should a pope come and deny all this? But when should he come if, at this moment, in 12 years, the cardinals aren't speaking? And look, the matter of the real pope being dead is true, because it's clear that no cardinal has said so, as Father Faré says, contesting this statement of mine. But this very fact is the proof of the pudding. What could we expect from cardinals appointed pre-Bergoglio who should, as Father Faré rightly says, when I say lumbered, it's not at all offensive because I'm Sicilian. I don't take offense. However, I'd like to understand if it's not proof of the name, because Father Faré challenges this statement, saying that there was no cardinal who formalized the vere papa mortis est. Exactly. And you expect. So you see how you're contradicting yourselves. So from these cardinals, who should have formalized that the Pope is dead by the 20th of January and didn't, you now expect them to resolve the Church's business. So what's behind it all? Any interests? Do you have any plans? What's behind your short circuit? Why are you so contradictory about this, Father? I'll return to that, he counters. I said cardinals should have elected the Pope by the rules of Vincenzo's university in Greece, by a set date after the Pope's death. If I recall, he died December 30th, so by January 20th. He was right in 2023. Brother Alexis was right. They didn't do it. Right then, but now, come on. Is Cardinal 𝐵elci expected in 2036? But it's not like it's to keep the cart rolling in the meantime. Mind you, don't mess with God's things. This is the time to get things straight. But it's not that there are other interests, because this is becoming a joke. So, the cardinals who didn't declare the real Pope dead should now be interested in saying that Bergoglio isn't the Pope. So these cardinals who said nothing when Bergoglio was elected, who for these 12 years have been shamefully silent, doing nothing concrete except for a few dubious statements, These cardinals, who didn't formalize their pre-Bergoglio appointment as the true Pope Mortis Est, because they were all pre-Bergoglio appointees, what should they do now? I'd like to understand, since it wasn't formalized, what those who didn't formalize it are now formalizing. There's a major short here. Look, but clearly they don't realize that over there we have to wait until 2036. So in the meantime, the cart keeps rolling. Because there are people who, instead of relying on serious theology, on those who have sacrificed themselves so that this earthly boast, as Paul would say, has so far only been achieved by Dominutella and the priests of the Sodalizio, who take it, pay for it, excommunicated, reduced to the lay state, persecuted, ghettoized, crucified by the media. Who else is doing this in the world? Why don't they recognize this? That we sacrificed ourselves. All we had to do was agree beforehand. We're not being poked in the eye, now we're the rude ones. What choice did we have? Should we hush? What's Dr. Scianci's interest? I'm sure he wants to save the church. He spoke of refounding the church and will do so with Cardinal 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐫 in 2036. But if 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐫 enters in 36, it's no big deal. 𝐥'𝐞, meanwhile, he's carried on with his commitment. He'll say it's not over yet because he's still alive. It might be that even if he's over 80, we'll be waiting until 2049 or 2075 because Cardinal 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐫 still hasn't died. Then, after Cardinal 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐫 dies, if Scianci is still alive, in the year 2114, Scianci will say that there can be erroneous conscience. So let's wait, because that is the Church of Christ. But Scianci, didn't he say there's a secession? But if there's a schism, how on earth do we claim that's the true Church of Christ? So where's Satan's church? Just Bergoglio? So we have a church of Satan inside the Church of Christ? Are you mad? But have they gone mad?